So Carl Froch has now come out and said that he's not interested in a rematch with George Groves. He believes that he won fair and square, this, that, and the other. I'm not surprised he's not taking a rematch because he knows how close he was to getting beat against Groves. And those who are in this delusional mindset where they think, well, he won the fight, he don't need a rematch. Well, financially, the Groves rematch makes sense. Yeah, there's not too many fights out there for Carl Froch now. He's already got spanked by Andre Ward. All right. Lucian Bute's gone up to light heavyweight. Froch says he ain't going to fight in light heavyweight. So who's he going to fight then? It's going to generate any kind of money right now. All right. He wants to fight Chavez Jr. Everyone wants to fight Chavez Jr. All right. Because he's a cash cow. But if that fight don't come off, who's he going to fight? And even the Chavez Jr. fight, to be honest with you, I don't think that would generate as much money for Froch as a Groves rematch would be. A Groves rematch right now would be huge in the UK. That could definitely fill out a football stadium. Yeah. So it's a massive fight. You know, Carl Froch, after he fought Mikkel Kessler, in the weeks after the Kessler fight, the Kessler rematch, he was talking about possibly fighting Kessler a third time. And that's an opponent that he just beat. Why was he talking about fighting an opponent that he just beat for a third time? Why? Because of money. Yeah? Because of the money. Now, you know, fighting, and obviously Lucian Bute as well, up until Bute fought Grachev. You know, obviously that they had a rematch clause, but Froch was more than happy to honor that rematch clause. You know, he wasn't trying to get out of it. He was happy to go over there and, you know, collect another big payday, fighting Bute again. So, you know, had he beat Groves easily and Groves had somehow had a rematch clause, I mean, that would have been very unlikely. But, you know, let's just say hypothetically that had been the case. You know, Froch would have been more than happy to fight a rematch, right? Or if the fight had gone to points and Froch had won by a couple rounds, he would have been more likely to, you know, take a rematch. But the fact that he got dropped in the first round and nearly knocked out, and there are these delusional people out there who really believe that Carl Froch was not nearly knocked out in the first round. Trust me, he was nearly knocked. He was a couple shots away from going down again after he got up. Yeah. If you see the end of the round when Carl Froch got up and from that knockdown, he's never been that badly hurt before. His own trainers even came out and said it. He's never been that badly hurt in a professional boxing ring. Yeah, he's been down before, like against Jermaine Taylor, but he was never as badly hurt against Taylor as he was against Groves. Right? He was seriously hurt against Groves. He got up and his legs were like Amir Khan. All right, he's seriously hurt when he went down in the first round against Groves, and his head was in the air. And towards the end of the round, he got caught with 2 more big shots. And I'm telling you, a couple more shots from Groves, Froch would have gone down again. And that probably would have been the end of his career there and then. Right? So, for one, Froch is lucky that the punch landed at the end of the round and not in the middle of the round. Because it could have all ended in the first round. Right? In Groves' favour. And then, obviously, Groves won most of the rounds in the fight leading up to the 9th round. And, you know, Froch was coming on a bit, but not so much that it was overwhelming or anything like that, you know. And then obviously Froch got the very, very fortunate stoppage in his favour by the referee. And it was a terribly premature stoppage. Anyone that says otherwise is just a straight up idiot. It was an extremely premature stoppage. It was a terrible stoppage. All right, we don't know what would have happened had the fight gone on. Froch might have stopped him, right? Or Froch might have, you know, not stopped him, and then Groves got away and won on points, or Groves might have stopped Froch himself. Froch is very open to shots, all right? We know that Groves had the power to knock Froch out, so anything could have happened. But anyone that's sitting here saying they know what would have happened and blah, 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 they're just talking out of their butt crack, all right? So please stop it. The fact is, the fight was stopped premature, so we'll never know what would have happened, and that's the whole problem with the stoppage. It was inconclusive. So anyway, he's ruled out the Groves fight because he knows the Groves fight is too dangerous, and should he take a Groves fight and Groves beat him, all this, you know, fantasy that Froch has built up around him, that he's the, you know, the greatest British fighter next to Lennox Lewis, would well and truly be over forever if he was to lose to George Groves, especially if he got knocked out by George Groves. And Adam Booth, who's still George Groves' manager as far as I know, he believes that if there's a rematch, Groves will take Froch out in a couple of rounds. I think he believes in under 4 rounds. And Paddy Fitzpatrick also believes the same thing. I'm not so sure about that myself, but I definitely think that Groves can make a lot more improvements going into the rematch than Froch can. Yeah, I believe Groves can make far more improvements than Froch can. And I think, Froch, I think he did pretty much all he could do in the first fight. I don't think there's really much else he could have done. So you'll be dealing with the same Froch in the rematch, but an improved Groves in the rematch. So definitely not a good look for Froch. So that's why him and his trainer, despite all the money on the table there would be for a Groves rematch, and that would be an enormous amount of money. By far one of the biggest purses in Froch's career. This is a grudge match here in the UK. The fight would do incredible numbers. And Froch is turning his back on all that money because he's afraid of the risk of fighting George Groves. He's afraid of the risk, right? This idea that he's this warrior and he'll fight anyone. He is a warrior, right? I'm not going to say he's a pussy or anything like that. He's a professional fighter at the end of the day, and he has been in real wars and he has shown a lot of heart in his career. But the Groves fight is something at this stage that he don't have the heart for. The Groves rematch, he don't have the heart for it. It's not about the fact he's supposedly already beat Groves or anything like that. Nothing to do with that, right? If Groves is not world class, as Froch is saying, if he has the beating of Groves, then why not take all this money on the table, the enormous amount of money for a rematch? It makes no logical sense. He's turning down the rematch because he's not confident of winning it. That is the truth. And anyone who says otherwise, you're just a moron, man. That's all I can say to you. But the other news is that Carl Froch has finally responded to Adonis Stevenson. Now, Stevenson has been calling Froch out for a very, very long time. Stevenson was the mandatory for Froch's IBF super middleweight title before Stevenson moved up and faced Dawson. And, Froch really didn't want to face Stevenson when Stevenson was his IBF mandatory. He was looking for a Lucian Bute rematch and looking for a Kessler fight and all this other stuff. He really didn't want to have to go down the road of facing his mandatory. And I think Froch owes Chad Dawson a massive thank you. I think he really owes Chad Dawson a lot because Chad Dawson basically gave Carl Froch his career for the last year. He gave Froch all these big paydays. And what do I mean by that? Well, if Chad Dawson hadn't given Adonis Stevenson the title shot at light heavyweight, then Stevenson would have forced Carl Froch to face him at super middleweight. And Carl Froch's career would have ended there and then. Because I believe Stevenson would knock Carl Froch out clean and probably early in the fight as well. I believe he would absolutely destroy Carl Froch. And I think Carl Froch knows it. That's why he's not interested in facing Adonis Stevenson. So he really owes Chad Dawson a big thank you because Dawson, really, there was no reason for Dawson to give Stevenson a title shot. Stevenson had never fought at light heavyweight before. He wasn't ranked at light heavyweight, but somehow Dawson just picked him out of obscurity and said, yeah, you'll do. I'll give you a title shot. And Stevenson went up and challenged him and knocked him out in 1 round. So literally, Carl Froch, you owe Chad Dawson a big, big thank you, man, because he saved your career. He's allowed you to eat for this past year, man. Because as far as I'm concerned, Stevenson would have absolutely wiped the floor with you. And, it's no surprise, obviously. Stevenson's been calling Froch out since he was a super middleweight, but even when Stevenson stepped up to light heavyweight and started knocking people out like Chad Dawson and Tavoris Cloud and Tony Bellew, who's actually a friend of Carl Froch, after every one of those fights, Stevenson was calling Carl Froch out. And Froch has not responded up until now. And now that Froch has responded, he's come out in typical delusional fashion. And he said that basically Stevenson's not really serious about calling him out. That he was basically just calling him out for the fans, just to have something to talk about on Twitter and just something to talk about in the news, but he's not really serious about it. It's just a bit of a joke, a bit of a laugh, this, that, and the other. No, it's not. It's not a laugh, right? This guy's been calling you out ever since he was super middleweight. This guy's been calling you out after every single one of his light heavyweight fights, right? Stevenson don't want to fight Kovalev, right? He wants to fight you, Carl Froch. Yeah, it's not a joke. But, Carl Froch has to somehow, in his deluded thought process, he has to some way try and rationalize it to himself to make it acceptable in his own deluded world, because in his own deluded world, he's this, warrior who fights anyone, who's not afraid of anyone. And, there's no way that someone like Stevenson could really be calling him out for real. Stevenson would never want to fight with someone of Froch's stature. That's ridiculous. This is probably the way that Froch is thinking and the way a lot of his fans are thinking. But the reality is Stevenson does want to fight Froch, all right, for whatever reason. He does want to fight him. And, I think deep down Froch knows or believes what I believe, and that, which is that Stevenson would knock him the fuck out, and that he'd do it, like I say, I think probably early in the fight. Froch don't want none of that, and that's fair enough. End of the day, every fighter can be beaten. Every fighter has their limits. So I'm not, criticizing Froch because someone can knock him out. So what? It's no big deal. The reason why I make such an issue of these kind of things is because Froch has been so vocal in criticizing other fighters, and has been so vocal in placing himself up on a pedestal above other fighters. The stuff that Carl Froch says about other fighters is so disrespectful, and yet he's not willing to do what other fighters have done. The guys who he criticizes, like Joe Calzaghe, he stepped up to light heavyweight. He fought Bernard Hopkins, So if you're going to talk bad about Calzaghe, why don't you try and emulate or surpass what Calzaghe actually did? Well, you don't try and do that, Mr. Froch. You just badmouth him, and all the while you're not willing to even fight Hopkins. You're not willing to step up to light heavyweight. Right? Why don't you take on one of the light heavyweights, like Calzaghe did? You ain't willing to do that. You get what I'm saying? To me, the hypocrisy is just too much. You understand? This is too much from Carl Froch, man. Too much hypocrisy. Just stop it. All right? Either put up or shut up. Yeah? That's what I would say. Yeah, just put up or shut up, Carl Froch. Either stop bad mouthing all these fighters, or, if you want to talk the talk, then walk the walk as well, man. You know what I mean? Because you're talking about fighters who actually did stuff that you ain't willing to do. Yeah, so put up or shut up, Mr. Froch. Yeah, you're disrespecting a lot of other fighters out there, man. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. Froch don't want to fight Groves. He don't want to fight Stevenson. He's probably looking for a Chavez Jr. fight, or maybe a rematch with Kessler, God forbid. Maybe if he can get the winner of Butte Pascal to come back down to super middleweight, he might look for that as well. Who knows, man? But right now he don't want to face no punches, it seems. He don't want to face no punches. Chavez Jr., I don't think he's a especially big puncher, not a super middleweight anyway. He's slow, so I know Froch really fancies that fight. It is what it is. Everyone seems to want to fight Chavez Jr. these days. He's in so much demand. Anyway, drop your comments below. This is Hatman. I'm out.